everybody, how's it going? In this tutorial, we're going to learn the ins and outs of typography and then working with layer styles to create cinematic text. So we're going to get started by opening the start file that I provided to the class, and you're going to see we have the Knight of the Round Table, and we're using a very famous style font from a movie that you may recognize. We're using the Ring Bearer font. Maybe some of you can guess the movie right off the bat, but we're going with the Ring Bearer font. We're going to look at the different techniques that we can use for creating a more immersive and cinematic look to this typeface. Let's go ahead and look at some of the menus you're going to use when you create typography on your own. So we're going to go to the text tool. You can see in the text tool, we have access to a lot of different options. We have our fonts, in which now you can filter your fonts based on serif. That would be those little kind of edges on them, slab serif. We have decorative typefaces. We have black letter. We have all sorts of really fun, cool looking typefaces. You can change those up there in that palette. You can also change the weight depending on the typeface. Some will say bold, italic, medium, book, you name it. We have the typeface size. You can also drag your left mouse button on these little icons. That's a fun way of like scaling your type to fit the way you would like it. We have the ability to play with the crispness of the typeface. We have the different ways we can adjust the orientation. We have the color. We have the ability to distort and bend our typefaces. It looks kind of gross right there. And then we have the ability to open up our character and paragraph palettes right here on the right side. There we can play with things like the leading, which is the space between different lines of text. We can play with the tracking, which is the space in between the text. Things like kerning as well. All sorts of different fun stuff. We can make everything all caps. We can make everything a drop cap to change the look to it. Really go ahead and explore these. Now, if you can't access this panel, remember you can go to your window and open that up in the window panel. If you still don't see it, once you're on a layer, you can go to the properties panel and these will come up. Just remember to pull down this little menu to see all those other options there. And these little ellipses are very helpful. They're a little deceiving depending on your screen size, but if you click on the little ellipse, it will reveal more options for that tool. I provided you the start file because we didn't want you to have to arrange all this. If you were to type, we just kind of typed night, and then I left some spaces, and I typed round table, all that good stuff. I scaled it to my liking. I can go ahead and hit delete here. Now that I have those, I put them in their own group. This is just an easy way for me to move around the entire block. So if I select that group, and I'm going to turn off auto select up here because I want to select them all together, I can use my smart guides here to center them to my composition. If you can't see your smart guides, you can go to view, and you have all sorts of extras in here, but you can kind of go ahead and make sure that you have show smart guides right there on your screen. Those are very, very helpful when it comes to typography. Now that we have that settled, let's go ahead and add a layer style. Layer styles are really cool ways to add effects to relatively flat text. So I'm going to go down here to the FX icon at the bottom of my layers panel, and I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And I'm going to be treated with a ton of different layer styles. For the look we're going for, we're going to just start at the top and open bevel and emboss. Once you have that open, you're going to see a slew of different effects that you can indeed create to get the illusion of metal or chiseled wood or whatever it may be. You can go ahead and here and play with these. We're going to start just by clicking bevel and emboss, and we're going to play with the different bevel options. I always suggest, if you're new to Photoshop, going through and tweaking a lot of these here. You can see it gave us almost like a 3D extruded look that we can kind of play with. That's kind of neat, that pillow emboss. We have the stroke emboss. Stroke emboss will only work if you have a stroke applied to it. Just be aware of that. For our sake, we're going to use inner bevel here, and we want to kind of make kind of a metallic ring-esque kind of feel, chiseled, fantasy-like look to this. I'm going to go ahead and play a little bit with the depth, and we're going to keep this set to, right now we have chiseled hard, chiseled soft. Let's do chiseled soft here. You can see They're just slightly different. I like the chiseled look. Immediately, you can see it's starting to look like maybe that favorite movie that we are inspired by here. I'm going to go ahead and tweak my settings. I always like to go to the extreme and see what it looks like. I don't, there's no set madness here. I'm going to just go to, I don't know, maybe in the 30s. Soften. If I soften that, it kind of takes away the effect. So I'm going to keep this. And then we have our shading. Our shading is pretty fun, in which you can kind of change the different shading type. And this is another one we're going to explore, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick, I don't know, that's looking really, really good. It's a little intense, but not by a lot. And I'm going to go ahead and change the altitude of that. Maybe we'll add like 20, and this looks like maybe -60 here. That's looking really dramatic. I like that dramatic light. Like the light is coming from underneath it. And so that's the way to look at it. You can imagine this is like your sun, and whenever you move this, that's going to change the point of your sun. So if I typed a really high number here, between 90, you can see it's going to kind of change where that sun comes from. The lower number, now it's kind of on the right side. I'm digging that. And we'll go back to that negative number because that gave us that drama that we're looking for. All right, now that we have that, we could play with the contour. Contours are really fun ways to just explore the different roundnesses of your actual scene. A lot of people don't do this, but when you're working with stylized typography, this can become a really fun way to build in texture and play around a little bit with the overall view of the chisel that we're working with. You could keep it default. I kind of like this one right here. Next is the highlights. So the highlights, we have all our blending modes. If I wanted to go to normal, this will just kind of show you a little bit what it will do. It's going to give me kind of a red feel to it. If I go ahead and change that blending mode to something like screen, that's just going to screen that red on top of the color. And here, that makes the red disappear. So for us, in this particular case, I want to kind of have a little, kind of an orange tint. We're going to play a little bit with some stylization later, and we're going to pull that down more to the red aspect of things. And I'm going to tweak that. I just want little glimmers of orange here. We can then play with the blackness of this. If you're not a big fan of that, feel free to play around with these, adjust as you see fit. We can even go up a little more yellow here. That's looking really, really awesome. Play with all of these different settings. See what works best for you. It really depends on what you're trying to create, and experimentation is really the way to do this. So you can see here that overlay looks kind of fun. If we go back to that original screen, that's looking also very good. I think I'm going to stick to kind of this mentality right here. Another cool thing you can do is add a little bit of contour to this. If I go ahead and play with my contour, that's going to kind of, you can see, pull as I slide it, some of those little ridges out, which makes it even look more or less chiseled. It's really up to you what your preference is. Once again, we have a little contour panel. We can customize this to our liking. We have textures, so you can load different patterns and textures. You can download patterns online. They're really easy to kind of load in here to your liking, and that will just give you a little bit more texture on it. We're going to keep that off for the time being. And there you go. Maybe we want to add a little bit of an outer glow to kind of give it that, glowing gold look. So I'm going to play with a little bit of the outer glow options. And, these can look pretty gnarly when you first start. By default, these are not going to be exactly what you're looking for in your scene. But with a few little tips and tricks and changes, you can see now we're getting some really nice light. And I always keep my opacity pretty low on these as I go. I'm going to go ahead and hit new layer style, and we're going to call this glowing ring effect, and we're going to hit OK. What did that just do? Well, that actually put this into your styles menu. So if you ever need to, pardon that, but if you ever need to kind of go and find styles now, if you go to Window Styles, you're going to notice that layer style is here. And why is that important? So if I go ahead and type, I don't know, UCF, and I get this kind of UCF type font, that looks really cool, great, glorious, everything's looking good. I can do that now with the click of a button. Before, I just select the layer, I hit OK, There it is. Really, really nice, easy way to kind of streamline things. You can build up, you can download these online. There are a ton of different text effects. You can search for different patterns. Let's be a little weird and we'll just grab one of these other ones just to see. Now, if this is kind of like a tavern-esque scene, that's great. We can make it like a rock XS scene, all sorts of fun things. We're going to keep our layer style going there. Really non-destructive, really fun and playable. So now we have a really nice title. Let's go ahead and add some flair to this. How do I do that? Well, I've gone ahead and just gathered a ton of stock imagery. We're going to just drag and drop and blend. This is where it becomes really fun. I'm going to start by just dragging in a background that is kind of, I don't know what you would call this, medieval. We're going to stretch it. We're going to just, again, we're going to kind of digital collage this. I'm going to put this to the very bottom, and we're going to rename this background stone. Try to always name our layers. And we're going to set this to a little bit of lower opacity because it won't blend directly on that background. But that's just going to give us a little starting point for our stone. There we go. We have that stone. Another way to import images is obviously going to place embedded under the file window. I really enjoy this drag and drop method. It's really, really fun. I could play around with other images here and drag and drop them. I mean, again, the possibilities are really endless. Here I kind of have this creature-esque kind of swamp. I can start blending those in with my background. As you can see, as I go down, there's a lot of different settings here. I kind of like this exclusion for this one. Again, there's no wrong answer. So I'm going to say BG over exclude. I'm going to go and add a couple adjustments layers on this, see what I can build up. You can play with these settings to really get the look that you're going for. This is not a process that you may not repeat. You may choose to go a different path. You may choose to use, again, the layer masks and go in here and, get that black conceals, white reveals brush and, loosen some of these elements, push back some of these elements in that levels adjustment. You may add masks to those specific elements to bring back in things like the rocks, right? And, bring back in some of that look. This is really, really forgiving, which is really nice. And it builds your artistry. I'm going to go ahead and play a little bit with this and maybe hit a colorize. I don't know if I'm digging that, but that looks really, really good. I'm actually really, really digging that. Kind of gives us that aged kind of effect, which is nice. I may get my brush and we'll hit the number key and lower that down to 30%. And we'll just pull some of those original blues in from that. This is looking awesome. Okay, well, a couple other fun things we can do. Now, the next step is I'm looking at this kind of glow, and I need some sort of light source to kind of come up here. I'm going to go ahead into my assets. I'm going to drop this kind of light glow, which is really nice. And I'm going to kind of angle this to kind of match. And, I may decide to pull this in all the way. Another great, I'm going to just pull it just a little bit to cover all that. Another great tip is when you start blending, you're going to notice some hard edges. That's what masks are for. Let's go in and I'm going to use a low opacity brush and I'm going to just push back these areas. I want to kind of showcase that they're kind of petering off in the background as I go. I really, really love that. Great. And we want to make sure we name our layers. In this case, I'm going to call it light beam. Always name your layers just to keep you in, and you can kind of move them around as you see fit. This is looking wonderful. What else can we add? Well, we could add more light if we really wanted to. This is pretty intense. So let's see what this one looks like. We'll do a screen here. The screen will kind of remove that black. But I am digging the drama that it's bringing. So I may just keep that as a low opacity. I'm going to put drama light as the name of this one. And this is looking really, really nice. Things are moving. I can move this in front of our text or behind our text, depending on what we create. Again, just giving us those kind of looks. And we want to make sure that we still keep those bevels on. All right, moving forward, we are talking about kind of a fun ring-like thing. So what if I drag this little ring here and we take this ring, and I think the O in round table could be a really fun place to play with this. So I'm going to move this one on top of my layer stack. And I'm going to go ahead and lower the opacity of this layer just a little bit. When I stretch this out, I can kind of find a happy medium here. That's looking really, really cool. And I'll put that opacity back to 100. And let's play with some blending modes. I'm going to go through and just play with these blending modes. Screen looks pretty good to me. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. And you can see I have that kind of weird kind of backdrop to this. Add yourself a mask. And get our big brush. Use your bracket keys to lower that brush. In this case, I'm going to lower it pretty intensely. And I'm going to just come through here and get rid of those hard edges for my compositing. It kind of gives me a fun kind of effect to this. And I always go through and look if there's a better option no matter what I do. But it looks like in this particular case, screen or lighten was the best option. Wonderful. So now that we have kind of that glowing look, let's add a bit of even more drama. Let's add some fire. All right. Now we want this fire to be in front of our text. So I'm going to name this glowing ring. We're going to name this one fire. These could be your images. I'm using stock just for demo's sake, but you can do a lot of fun stuff with these. And we could go ahead and look through all our settings here. Multiply, again, will take away the white areas. These second areas will take away the things like the black areas, which can be really helpful. Linear dodge is fun because it gives this like brighter feel to it. Any of these, you can always go to your adjustment layers and create a clipping mask, and that will kind of help you isolate the different areas, the glows, push and pull those looks to them. Once again, we have the layer mask on that, but I'm just going to push and pull this, and we will just kind of maybe even lower the opacity on this one. That's looking really rad. I like that. We have so many more. Maybe we add a few more sparks to the side here. Great. We'll keep that underneath that adjustment layer for the time being. We'll hit screen. We'll drag and drop. That looks pretty fun. Just looking at our view here. Maybe we want to put these behind the text. Yeah, that's looking really, really good. And don't be afraid to use really low opacities. A lot of people kind of think they have to, like everything has to really pop. It is not necessarily the case. As you can see here, we're getting some pretty fun options. I have another cloud layer that I'm going to pull in, and we'll put fog. Very, very cool. Delete those levels there and just make this fog really low opacity as we see fit. There we are. All right, make sure we delete that level. Cool. All right, we are getting somewhere. Okay, at this stage, we're getting close to the final output. I'm going to add one more layer on top of everything, and this is just going to kind of be like a dust filter to kind of bring it all together. And that dust filter, we can go ahead and click in. Again, we could use, I like that color dodge add, and I'm going to make this really low opacity. We'll call it dust. We'll look at all our layers, making sure they're named. They are all named. That looks really, really good. The final thing I'm going to do is take all of these, grab them, holding shift. So I grab the first layer and the bottom layer, and I'm going to pull them in their group. Now it's not letting me do that because that background layer is locked. That's an easy fix, but I'm going to grab them all and now drag them in, and we're going to call this working layers. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control-Alt-Shift-E to do what I call the mega flatten. So I'm going to say flattened. And in this particular case, I'm going to add a couple other things. So I may fill that layer with white using Control Backspace, adding filter, adding some lens correction, going to custom. Let's do a dark vignette around this. Very, very nice. and set this to multiply. Very cool. And then we'll add one more curves adjustment layer on top. We will just tweak that one last time with the brightness and contrast, just to make sure that that doesn't get completely washed out. And there we have it. One thing I didn't do, let me go back real quick. We got to make it really cheesy. We got to add a little optical flare. So I'm going to take my optical flare real quick on this final image. And we're going to do screen. There we go. I can't believe I forgot that. Why didn't you all remind me? Optical flares, especially for cinematic movies, they're so overused, but I'm going to hold Alt here and just kind of add a few little tinges of this. There we go. We can add one or more. We'll lower the opacity, just a little bit of those. Very cool. But there you are. We now have a cinematic title using kind of creative collage, blending, you name it. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. I hope it gave you an idea of how you can take these approaches when you're doing your Photoshop work. Even if you're making your movie poster or whatever it may be, you can create some really fun titles and really explore your artistry as you go forward. All right, everybody, I will catch you in the next tutorial. Have a good one.